Now that Donald Trump is losing all of these cases in court, they're attacking the judges. I mean, some people are out there actually making violent threats against the judges and their families.
He got a rare public rebuke from Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts after the president called for the impeachment of a federal judge who ruled against the administration.
Now think about that for a second. You disagree with the opinion of a judge and your response is to try to impeach the judge? What about appealing the decision?
So you're scrolling through Twitter, seeing the usual Trump rants about judges being unfair, when suddenly the most buttoned-up man in America, Chief Justice John Roberts, decides he's had enough. The judicial equivalent of your super quiet neighbor finally snapping after you played music too loud at 3 a.m. That's right, folks. The guy who normally has all the personality of unseasoned chicken breast just dropped the gavel on Trump's head. Roberts, who usually stays quieter than a mouse at a cat convention, actually spoke up and told Trump that judges shouldn't be impeached just because Orange Man doesn't like their rulings. I mean, when the human embodiment of beige wallpaper tells you to knock it off, you know you've crossed a line.
And that's what Chief Justice John Roberts said. We don't deal with a disagreement over the law by impeaching the judge. We appeal the case.
Obviously, people can say what they want, and they're certainly free to criticize the Supreme Court, and if they want to say that its legitimacy is in question, they're free to do so. The court has always decided controversial cases. The decisions have always been subject to intense criticism, and that is entirely appropriate.
Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Imagine the most boring man in America, a guy so bland his hobby is probably watching paint dry, suddenly throwing hands at the former president. That's what happened when Chief Justice Roberts finally had enough of Trump's nonsense. If you're wondering what John Roberts is like, picture a human Zen monk in judicial robes. This guy has spent his entire career being so reserved that watching him deliver opinions is like listening to someone narrate a golf tournament in a library.
Across the entire country, and judges are wrong sometimes. So what does that person do? He appeals. He asks for a special writ in some cases.
Including within the last year, asked to multiple times. What do you make of the fact that this rare statement was put out now by the Chief Justice?
One can't imagine it's a coincidence that it happened on the same day that Donald Trump explicitly called for the impeachment of a judge who had been ruling against his administration.
Roberts has built his reputation on being the judicial branch's Mr. Calm and Collected. The guy speaks with all the excitement of someone reading the terms and conditions on a toaster warranty. He's practically the human equivalent of vanilla pudding. Not even French vanilla, just regular plain unsweetened vanilla pudding. That's what makes his recent outburst against Trump so absolutely jaw-dropping. For years, Trump has been on a judge-bashing spree, throwing tantrums whenever a court ruling doesn't go his way. He's called them Obama judges and so-called judges, like a toddler who can't get his way at the ice cream shop. Through all this judicial mudslinging, Roberts mostly kept his mouth shut tighter than a clam at high tide. He was determined to stay above the political food fight, maintaining that whole courts are nonpartisan vibe that Supreme Court justices are supposed to have. But then Trump went and did something so ridiculous that even Mr. Vanilla Pudding couldn't take it anymore. When Judge James Boasberg ruled against Trump's attempt to use the Alien Enemies Act, Trump didn't just disagree, he called for the judge's impeachment.
As you know, Judge Boasberg issued a short temporary restraining order so he could hear more arguments, pointing out that the Alien Enemies Act, the president now has said, I'm going to use it against the gang and remove these people, not only remove them, but send them to a Salvadoran prison where, frankly, they're doomed.
Established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists.
This is basically like losing at Monopoly and demanding the banker be fired. It's not how any of this works, but Trump's never been big on understanding how things actually work. That's when Roberts, a man who normally has all the personality of a manila folder, actually spoke up. The statement from Roberts was the judicial equivalent of your librarian suddenly screaming profanities in the reference section. People in Washington nearly spilled their overpriced lattes when they heard it. Roberts essentially explained that when you disagree with a judge, you don't try to get them fired. You file an appeal like a normal functioning adult. The human embodiment of beige wallpaper finally showing emotion proves that Trump has pushed the judicial system to its absolute breaking point. What makes this even more stunning is that Roberts made this statement fully aware that Trump might be president again soon. That means the quietest man in DC actually risked his own neck to defend the courts. When the judicial equivalent of a sleeping pill risks his career to speak out, you know something truly dangerous is happening to our democracy. What makes this whole situation explosion-worthy isn't just that a typically reserved judge cleared his throat, it's that the entire foundation of how America works just flashed a big red warning light. Here's the thing about the Supreme Court that makes this such a big deal. They've always kept their distance from political food fights. It's their whole brand to stay above the mess. Like that one friend who refuses to engage in group chat drama. Justices traditionally avoid getting into Twitter battles with presidents because their authority literally depends on people believing they're fair and impartial. That self-imposed restraint is what gives their decisions weight. But Trump's been treating judges like contestants on some twisted reality show where he's the host who can fire anyone who doesn't kiss the ring. His attacks aren't just rude, they're calculated attempts to intimidate the entire judicial branch into submission. When he calls for impeachment over a ruling he doesn't like, he's essentially trying to create a judiciary that's afraid to rule against him, a personal squad of black-robed yes men. You have to understand what makes Roberts speaking up so earth-shattering in Washington. As head of the Supreme Court, literally the top legal position in America, his words carry massive weight. When he breaks his silence, it's because he sees something that threatens the entire system of government. It's like when your super chill friend who never gets mad suddenly flips a table. You know something serious just happened. Let's be crystal clear about what impeaching a judge actually means, because it's not supposed to be a presidential temper tantrum tool. Judges can only be impeached for actual misconduct, like taking bribes or committing crimes, not for making rulings a president finds inconvenient. What Trump is suggesting would basically turn judges into his personal employees who could be fired at will, completely destroying the independence of an entire branch of government. And the separation of powers doctrine isn't just some dusty concept from your high school civics class. It's the whole reason America doesn't have kings. By dividing government power among 3 branches, no single person gets to call all the shots. Trump's attacks are trying to bulldoze that division, essentially saying, if you don't rule my way, I'll destroy your career. So here we are, folks, watching the most vanilla man in Washington finally take a stand against Trump's nonsense. When a guy whose resting heart rate is probably 5 beats per minute gets worked up enough to speak out, you know we've entered bizarro world. While Trump tries to turn the justice system into his personal reality show where he can fire judges who don't kiss his ring, the rest of us should probably wake up. This isn't just political theater, it's a straight-up attack on how America works. If Mr. Cardboard Personality is willing to risk Trump's Twitter rage, maybe it's time we all paid attention to what's actually happening.